Hare Krishna. So today we're continuing in our Bhakti Shastri course. This is the 22nd part of the Bhagavad Gita portion of the course. We're going to try to finish up chapter 10. It's quite a few verses, 30 verses. So I'm not sure if we're going to actually have time to do that, but we're going to try. And whatever's left over we'll pick up next time. So we covered the first part last time, 1 through 11, which we understood was kind of a spillover from the topics a continuation spillover from the topics in chapter 9 of pure devotional service. And they gave us this very beautiful, very succinct summary of the process of devotional service. And now we're going to change change the direction a little bit here. In the rest of the chapter. So we'll begin here with texts 10, 12 and 13. They're together. And this is Arjuna speaking. He's just heard from Krishna the beautiful introduction to the beginning part of chapter 10, where he sums up a pure devotional service. And so Arjuna says, "You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages, such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa, confirmed this truth about you, and now you are yourself declaring it to me." Okay? So we'll take a look at the various qualities here that Arjuna mentions. It's first of all, there's Param Brahma. Prabhupada translates as like the supreme truth, and Prabhupada in the purport says, "You are Param Brahma, the supreme personality of Godhead." In the purport, he says, and Baladev Vidyabhusha, one of our other main commentators, says it refers to eternity, knowledge, and bliss. So it's referring to the personal form of the Lord, who's the form of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. He says, "You're the supreme personality of Godhead." And you're the Param Dham. Prabhupada also uses that terminology, absolute truth, Param Satyam, in a similar way. And we heard about how Krishna is the source of everything. Then Param Dhamma, Prabhupada translates that in the word for word as the supreme sustenance. And the purport, he explains a little bit further. He says, "In the Kena Upanishad, it is stated that the Supreme Brahman is the rest for everything, and Krishna has already explained that everything is resting on him." And that's in the purport. So we understand Krishna not only is the source of everything, but he sustains everything. He said in chapter 7, "Everything rests upon me like pearls on a thread," when you have a necklace of pearls. Then he says he's the Pavitram Paramam, the supremely pure. And Prabhupada in the purport says, "One cannot be disinfected from sinful activities unless he surrenders unto the Supreme Lord." Krishna said the same earlier in the chapter, that you can't be fully, without bhakti, you can't be fully cleansed of all sinful reactions. And then he's the Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adi Devam Hajam Vibhum. And Prabhupada, in the translation, smooth translation, says, "You are the eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, and the greatest." So that the Shashvatam is eternal, Divyam is transcendental, Adi Devam, the original Lord, a Purusham, person or personality, Ajam, unborn, Vibhum, the greatest. So he makes it all kind of one sentence there in the translation. And then the purport, he says, "He is the supreme existence. He is free from bodily needs, birth and death. He is the supreme origin. He has no cause, for he is the cause of all causes, and everything is emanating from him." So we should be, by now, about the purifying one, he said, last week that he, appears in people's hearts and purifies them with the shining lamp of knowledge. So we should be actually pretty familiar with all of these. Understand that these things refer to Krishna by now, especially through the Bhagavad Gita so far, and also through the Isha Upanishad. These things should be fairly familiar to us. And so Prabhupada says in the purport, he says, here Arjuna expresses himself through the grace of Krishna. If we want to understand Bhagavad Gita, we should accept the statements in these two verses. And it is not that because that Krishna is Arjuna's intimate friend, Arjuna is flattering him by calling him the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The absolute truth. Whatever Arjuna says in these two verses is confirmed by Vedic truth. So it's not sentiment here. That Arjuna is very fond with Krishna and he's flattering him. So it's not only has Krishna spoken it, but it's there in the Vedic literature. And then he says this is also confirmed by great personalities, of whom Narada is the chief. So the great sages, the Vedas, and Krishna himself are saying these things. And so Arjuna is speaking authorized statements here. I don't think that that's simply because they're buddies that Arjuna is lacking objectivity here. He's speaking on solid ground here with what he says. And so what's happening here is I think you can almost feel that Arjuna has been inspired. Krishna says Prabhupada says he's speaking by the grace of Krishna, because you can't understand these things about Krishna unless we'll see that unless it's revealed by him anyway. But Arjuna is inspired by what he's heard. It's really wonderful topics. Krishna said it was the supreme secret and the supreme knowledge. And so that is really wonderful. And so you can see Arjuna is kind of inspired by that. But he's about to make a request from Krishna, so he's also showing him respect. This is also the etiquette, you're making some request, and so he's showing him also what he heard, but he's praising Krishna because he's going to make a request that he wants to hear something more from him. So it's also good form. But as you can see, it's very enthusiastic. You can almost feel the enthusiasm. He's so inspired by what he's heard. So in 14, he says, "O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality." And Prabhupada says in his purport to the verse, he says, "The acceptance by Arjuna of all that Krishna says should be emulated. Then we can understand the essence of Bhagavad Gita, and then only can we understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So it's not that we can't have any doubts or questions, but we should accept that and have faith that what's being spoken here is true. We can clarify our doubts. We can try to answer our questions. But we should feel confident that we're receiving this information from the highest possible source. So Prabhupada makes the distinction sometimes about asking, challenging questions, or having it's also a question of whether any kind of doubt breaks our faith. So at least we should start from that platform that this is really something powerful and coming from the highest authority. And the more that we understand that, and we can clarify our doubts. We can try to clarify what's there. We can have questions. That's all right. I said if we have confidence in the material, it will help us to progress. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in that verse, Arjuna refers to Krishna as Keshava, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur breaks down that word into syllables, Keshava, and he finds a meaning in it that's relevant to what Arjuna is saying. Arjuna is saying that the Devatas nor the Danavas, the demigods, the demons, neither of them can understand you. And so Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says, O Keshava, you bind up even Brahma and Shiva with ignorance of your true nature. And he breaks down, he says, Ka is Brahma, Isha is Shiva, and Va is to bind. So he breaks the Keshava down into syllables and finds this meaning here. It binds up even Brahma and Shiva with ignorance. Then certainly it must be said that the Devatas and the Danavas, the demigods and demons, also do not know you. So he's seeing a reason why Arjuna picks that particular word for addressing Krishna. This happens throughout the Gita. We're covering it very quickly, and the idea is to try to that you'll understand the main ideas, how the ideas fit together. But there's a lot of detail in Bhagavad Gita. It's something that you study through your many lifetimes. So that was just interesting. He gave that interesting explanation of Keshava there. And then 15, indeed you alone know yourself by your own potency. It's Swayam personally, Atmana by yourself. In the word for word. So indeed you alone know yourself by your own potency, O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe. And Prabhupada has an exclamation point at the end of this translation. Again, it shows his enthusiasm, I think. Shows the mood that Arjuna is speaking in here. As I said, the topics of chapter 9 and the beginning of chapter 10 are just amazing. They're dealing with the most confidential truth. And they give us, an amazing hope that we can eternally reside with Krishna in his service. So again, we'll take a look at the various things that Arjuna says, how he describes Krishna. Swayam eva atmana atmanam. So you personally, certainly by yourself, veta, know. So Prabhupada says in the translation, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency. Krishna already mentioned how he creates everybody else. So who else can know? Everybody else is the creation. So he's the only one who can know himself. He's the only authorized source of knowledge about himself and those who have received it from him. Purusha Uttama, greatest of all persons. Bhuta Bhavana, or origin of everything. And then in the purport he says, the father of all living entities. We're going to come across this later on. This Bhuta oftentimes means the living entities. And so Prabhupada is showing that in the purport, father of all living entities. But in his word translation, he says origin of everything. So the Bhuta can also just mean the whole creation. And we'll see how that comes into play later on, also in a verse. And then it's the same thing happens in Bhuta Isha, the Lord or controller of everything. And Prabhupada says the supreme controller of everyone in the purport. So in the word translation, he says, O Lord of everything, and meaning controller. So Bhuta here means everything. He's taking that meaning. And then the supreme controller of everyone in the purport. So that means more again the living entities. Then Deva, the Lord of all the demigods, the God of gods. Right? And Prabhupada says, the worshipful God of all demigods. So the ones who the demigods worship. He puts it that way. That's a nice way to see it. And then Jagat Pate, O Lord of the entire universe. Okay? So again, all these things shouldn't be particularly surprising or new to us in our situation, having gone through the Ishopanishad and Bhagavad Gita to this point. And here Prabhupada says in his purport, and he explains, there's an explanation of why Arjuna uses these particular terminology in this verse. And we'll see that Prabhupada seems to follow both Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and also Baladev Vidyabhushan. So let's take a look at Prabhupada's explanation here in the purport. Yet many liberated persons cannot understand Krishna as Purushottama, the Supreme Person. Therefore, Arjuna addresses him as Purushottama. Yet one still may not understand that Krishna is the father of all living entities. Therefore, Arjuna addresses him as Bhuta Bhavana. And if one comes to know him as the father of all the living entities, still one may not know him as the supreme controller. Therefore, he is addressed here as Bhutesha, the supreme controller of everyone. And even if one knows Krishna as the supreme controller of all living entities, still one may not know that he is the origin of all the demigods. Therefore, he is addressed herein as Deva Deva, the worshipful God of all demigods. And even if one knows him as the worshipful God of all demigods, one may not know that he is the supreme proprietor of everything. Therefore, he is addressed as Jagatpati. So we see, I'm going to quote here from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, because it's along the same lines, but I think he's a little, there's some ways it's even a little easier to understand. Vishwanath Chakravarti says, these words may be taken as terms describing the nature of being the Supreme Person, Purushottama. You are the Father of all creatures, Bhuta Bhavana, but since sometimes the Father is not respected, Arjuna says, you are the controller of all creatures. So therefore, it should be respected. And but sometimes, he says, even a controller is not so worthy of worship. I can think of a case about that. In Europe in the 18th century, there are a lot of people that had this notion of God as the first cause of everything. It's called deism. And so in that sense, he was kind of the first cause that got everything in motion. But there was no concept then of us having any relationship with him. It was just, that's it, he starts things in motion and everything goes. So the same thing, you would have a controller, but what if there's but it's just controlling, maybe just in a very impersonal way. And we can't have any relationship with that. So the person says, may not be worthy of worship, because what can you do? It's just, he's just doing what he's doing, and that's it. Therefore, he says, you are the Deva among all the Devas. Though the Devas are worshipable, sometimes, so he's the one who's worshipped even by the demigods. So it says, yeah, he's worthy of worship, and it means he can respond. Sometimes they do not give protection. So we have to worship them. They may reciprocate in some way, but so sometimes they may not give protection. He says, therefore, he says Jagat Pate. He uses the notion of Pate as the protector, rather than just the Lord. So he's saying that in some way, then we feel we have all these different levels of Krishna, and it comes way down from the very, very far up, the Supreme Person, who's the Father of all creatures, and the controller of everything, and the one who is worshipped. And it keeps coming down a little bit closer and closer to us, a little bit more accessible, and then finally, he's the person who can give us protection. That indicates a certain personal interest in us. That wouldn't have to be there just if he's the Purushottama or the father or the controller. These things. So it's interesting how it kind of cascades down into making our relationship more understandable, and should make Krishna more dear to our hearts when we think of him in terms like that. So in text 16, now Arjuna makes his request. He says, in the next couple of verses, please tell me in detail of your divine opulences, vibhutayaha, vibhutis or opulences, by which you pervade all these worlds. And Srila Prabhupada says in his purport, he's giving an explanation for why Arjuna is asking this. He says Arjuna knows Krishna perfectly well. I mean, no one knows him perfectly, but he's an eternal associate of Krishna, so he knows him very well in his transcendental form. So he doesn't see a lot of value for Arjuna in hearing about these things. But he says that people in general, and the impersonalists in particular, concern themselves mainly with the all-pervading nature of the Supreme. So Arjuna is asking Krishna how he exists in this all-pervading aspect through his different energies. One should know that this is being asked by Arjuna on behalf of the common people. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that it is difficult to understand the truth about you. He's saying he's putting these words in Arjuna's mouth. Therefore, I want to know about your vibhutis. Your vibhutis are very attractive, divya. You should speak about them fully. So he's saying a similar thing to what Srila Prabhupada is saying, is that it's hard to understand Krishna in his personal form. We've discussed this also before. And so for persons who don't know so well about that, these things, the vibhutis, description of the vibhutis, may help to give them a first step to try to understand Krishna in his transcendental form. This is very difficult to know that. So give me something more accessible. And then 17, O Krishna, O Supreme Mystic, how shall I constantly think of you, and how shall I know you? In what forms are you to be remembered, O Supreme Personality of Godhead? This is going to introduce another notion here of the value of this, what's coming up in this chapter. Prabhupada says in the purport, he says, the superior devotee is concerned not only for his own understanding, but for the understanding of all mankind. So Arjuna, out of his mercy, because he is a Vaishnava, a devotee, is opening for the common man the understanding of the all-pervasiveness of the Supreme Lord. So he's repeating partially what he did before, but I thought it was nice how he reveals the heart of a devotee and a Vaishnava. The devotees see not only themselves as being dear to Krishna and seeing themselves as having a relationship with Krishna, but they understand everyone does. And so they see the value in others. And then Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains it in a slightly different way that I'm going to show later on. Prabhupada also and other places seems to agree with. And so this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur kind of putting these words in Arjuna's mouth. He says, how can I, thinking of you, know you at all times? Of course you say, Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattva. That's from the final verse of the 9th chapter, where he says what you should do in bhakti. You should always be thinking of me, right? Only by bhakti can I be known as I am in truth. That's this is different. That's a similar verse is there at the end of the 9th chapter, but this is in the 18th chapter. 1855. Where he says that only by bhakti can I be known as I am in truth. So he just perform bhakti. But he says, but in what objects can I think of you? This means, how can I perform bhakti? By thinking of you in various objects. Okay? So it may not just be for, because if it's just for people that don't have any conception of Krishna, then we may want to write off the rest part of this chapter. So, well, especially if we're devotees, we have some understanding of Krishna's form. We're trying to worship. Most of us who are taking the Bhakti Shastri class are in that category. So we might think, well, we can kind of write off the rest of this chapter, but it's not the case. So we're going to try to establish that what we're going to cover today has value to us as practicing devotees. And Prabhupada says in the purport, he says, the Mundaka Upanishad confirms that the Supreme Lord, in whom, and I'm taking this back from the earlier text, Bhagavad Gita 10, 12, and 13. The Mundaka Upanishad confirms that the Supreme Lord, in whom everything is resting, can be realized only by those who engage constantly in thinking of him. Okay? This constant thinking of Krishna is smaranam, one of the methods of devotional service. It is only by devotional service to Krishna that one can understand his position and get rid of this material body. So I'm going to try to connect the topics that we're about to hear with us, who are not impersonalists and have some understanding of Krishna's form. So here I found that I tried to find something. I know Prabhupada talks about this in many different places, but I did a quick little search in the Veda base, and I found this letter that Prabhupada wrote to Hayagriva, his disciple. This was when he was from Los Angeles in the 15th of January 1968. So he's responding to a letter that Hayagriva wrote to him. He says, I'm very glad to read in your letter a nice line. This is what Hayagriva wrote to him. My main concern is seeing him constantly in my daily life. That is to remember him and not to forget him. So this is what Prabhupada's quoting that from Hayagriva's letter to him. And then Prabhupada responds, he says, this is actually Krishna consciousness. We can remember Krishna in every moment. We can remember Krishna while taking a glass of water because the taste of water is Krishna. We heard about that in the earlier chapter. We can remember Krishna as soon as we see the sunlight in the morning because the sunlight is a reflection of Krishna's bodily effulgence. Similarly, as soon as we see moonlight in the evening, we remember Krishna because moonlight is also reflection of sunlight. So these are a couple of the vibhutis we're going to hear about here, the sun and the moon. And so we see how Prabhupada is saying that a practicing devotee with some understanding of Krishna may be reminded of Krishna's presence by the various vibhutis, and that it can be of use in our sadhana. And so that's I want to establish here, so that we don't think that we should just skip through this remainder of the chapter because it's only for the impersonalists and people who have no conception of Krishna. So one purpose of the descriptions of the vibhutis or opulences is to help those who cannot understand the transcendental form of Krishna and help them to begin to understand him. That we understood from the purport in this verse. Another purpose is to help those in the path of bhakti and who do have some understanding to be able to remember Krishna in daily life. So that's the purpose here. So many of the times, we're dealing with the outside world, and people on the path of sadhana, we tend to forget Krishna. The purpose of sadhana bhakti, we'll find out when we study Nectar of Devotion, is to come to that point of steady remembrance. So if there are things within our vision in particular that will remind us of Krishna, we see them connected with Krishna from the 10th chapter, it will help us. We'll remember Krishna. We may have forgotten, but we'll remember. And if we're remembering, we'll keep remembering. As we already know, and as we will hear again, all things are Krishna's energy. So the second purpose is what's useful for our practice as bhaktas. As we already know, and as we will hear again, all things are Krishna's energy, but here Arjuna asks for specific objects which will be particularly useful in the remembrance and understanding of Krishna. So in one sense, right, you can say anything, you see anything, and we should see it as Krishna's energy. But, some things aren't going to be so good at conveying an idea of Krishna. And what Krishna will describe will be things which are generally it's going to be things which are the best in a particular category or group, or the essence or essential quality in a certain thing. And there'll be all these prominent things, because like I said, you can see, like say for example, Krishna could say that that he's the largest of the ants, an army ant or something, and among ants he's the army ant. But the ants aren't very impressive, so they don't convey much of an idea of Krishna. So he's going to be the most prominent, the greatest, the best of some significant of a significant group, something not ants, but something more powerful, and the essence of things that are important. So that's why Arjuna asked him for specific ways that he can be remembered. Give me objects that will help to convey something about Krishna. Help us to remember. I had somebody ask me one time, if God's the source of everything, why don't we worship an outhouse, for example? Okay. Well, for one thing, we don't worship the various opulences, especially the material ones, directly. We see them. We talked about in the previous chapter. There are some folks, again, who probably don't have a clear understanding of Krishna's form so much that they worship vibhutis, opulences of Krishna, but see them as connected. So we never worship anything disconnected from Krishna. But also, if we're trying to understand Krishna, little insignificant parts of his energies don't convey much about him. So the outhouse, which just isn't something very nice. So it does come from Krishna, but it doesn't reveal much about his personality or his position. So it's not something that we're going to be wanting to use as a device to remember him. So he's going to give us better things to remember him by. In the 18th verse, Arjuna continues to say, O Janardhan, again please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I am never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. Okay, so here's another reason why he wants to know. Prabhupada says in his purport, he says, now as far as Amritam, nectar, is concerned, any narration or statement concerning Krishna is just like nectar. And this nectar can be perceived by practical experience. So he said, hear about Krishna, try it. He's inviting us to do so. O Janardhan, in people such as me, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is breaking down here why Arjuna uses the word Janardhan in reference for Krishna in this particular verse. He says, O Janardhan, in people such as me, Jana, regular people, by the sweetness of your beneficial instructions, you create longing. You make us agitated. Ardana. We have an ardent longing, I guess, and make us beg. Ardana here is a Sanskrit word, but it's interesting. It sounds like ardent. And you make us beg. What can we do? So he's saying that just hearing about Krishna is so wonderful. So he says, tell me more. He told me some of your opulences, now tell me more. Prabhupada says, the senses of the individual soul are limited and do not permit him to understand the totality of Krishna's affairs. Still, the devotees try to understand Krishna, but not on the principle that they will be able to understand Krishna fully at any specific time or in any state of life. Rather, the very topics of Krishna are so relishable that they appear to the devotee as nectar. Thus, the devotees enjoy them. So, especially this is true no matter what, whatever we hear from, but particularly with the vibhutis. We're talking about different parts of Krishna's energies, different of his expansions. And so they cannot allow us to understand Krishna very fully. And but still, because they're connected with Krishna, and Krishna's recommending that these are ways that we can meditate on him, that they're still, this is, they appear as nectar, and the devotees will enjoy them. And we mentioned that Krishna is unlimited, and so only he can really understand himself. So no matter what, whether we're studying his vibhutis or narrations about him personally, we'll never get to the bottom of Krishna, of understanding him. But that doesn't matter. It's a wonderful thing to try. And so in text 19, Krishna he responds. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, yes, I will tell you of my splendorous manifestations, but only of those which are prominent, O Arjuna, for my opulence is limitless. So he said, we can go on forever and ever here, but I'm going to only give you some. To satisfy you, but we can't get to the bottom of this ever. And Prabhupada says in his purport, the word pradanyataha, he says principle, is very important because we can understand only a few of the principal details of the Supreme Lord, for his features are unlimited. It is not possible to understand them all. And vibhuti, as used in this verse, refers to the opulences by which he controls the whole manifestation. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, these vibhutis are excellent. He says that's referred to by Divya in the verse. Not like grass or bricks. It's not commonplace things. The word vibhuti includes both material and spiritual manifestations of the powers of the Lord. Because they all arise from the Shakti of the Lord, they should all be considered as worthy forms of the Lord for contemplation, although some are preferable to others. So again, Krishna is selecting a few of his opulences, a few of his energies, and he's trying to choose ones that will be helpful in having the persons who are not familiar to gain some understanding of him, and for those of us who are more familiar to help keep up our ability to remember him more constantly. So now we're up to text 20, and this is where Krishna begins to give his vibhutis. He says, I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the hearts of all living entities. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. There's a little bit more complexity here because there's a word here, sarvabhuta, which Prabhupada translates in the word for word as all, of all living entities. As we saw before, that bhuta can also mean everything. He's we came before that kind of dual meaning there, bhuta. So that's going to figure in how the acharyas understand this verse. And it shows the connection between the first part where he's the super soul and he's also the beginning, middle, and end. So we'll see how that is, those are connected when we understand it the way the acharyas do. So we'll look at first at Srila Prabhupada's purport. And he says, Krishna first informs Arjuna that he is the soul of the entire cosmic manifestation. You see, that's bhuta in the other sense rather than living entity. By dint of his primary expansion, before the material creation, the Supreme Lord, by his plenary expansion, accepts the Purusha incarnation, and from him everything appears. Therefore he is Atma, the soul of the Mahatattva, the universal elements. The total material energy is not the cause of the creation. Actually, the Mahavishnu enters into the Mahatattva, the total material energy. He is the soul. When Mahavishnu enters into the manifested universes, he again manifests himself as the super soul in each and every entity. So Prabhupada here is talking about there's the two Purusha avatars. There's three Purusha avatars. He's mentioning two, Mahavishnu and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who is the super soul of individual entities. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, first you should think of me alone as the cause of all these vibhutis. That's why that he's saying this is why Krishna is starting out in this way. By using just one of my portions. I am Atma, the soul within Prakriti. So it's the same what Prabhupada said. I am the creator of the Mahatattva, the Purusha, the Paramatma, and this is Karanadakshayi Vishnu, Mahavishnu. And then he says, I am situated in the aggregate of all beings as the Antaryami of the universal form. So he's bringing in Garbhodakshayi Vishnu, the second of the Purusha avatars who exists in every universe. I am also situated within the hearts of all living entities as the Antaryami of the individuals. So he's seeing it as all three of the Purusha avatars are being mentioned here by Krishna. And then Baladeva Vidyabhushan, he kind of clarifies a little bit. He points out the multiple meaning of sarvabhuta, of all living entities, as Prabhupada puts it. And so that we saw in verse 15, bhuta can refer to the whole material creation as well as just the living beings. So that's what Baladeva Vidyabhushan, he mentions. That's how you can derive the three Purusha avatars out of this verse, and not just the Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, the super soul in the heart of living entities, but also the super soul of, so the Karanadakshayi Vishnu or Mahavishnu is the super soul of all of material nature. He injects the other souls into it. He is the super soul, really. The Garbhodakshayi Vishnu is the super soul of each individual universe. Usually Brahma is considered to be the soul of the universe, and then Garbhodakshayi Vishnu is the soul of the super soul of the whole universe. And then Kshirodakshaya Vishnu is the super soul in each living entity. So the creation begins with Karanadakshayi Vishnu, starting everything, and when all the creations are over, everything, all the living entities and things will go through all back into the body of Karanadakshayi Vishnu. And he's kind of the beginning and the end. And then Vishnu is known as the maintainer of everything. So when you look at the verse that way, as referring to the three Purusha avatars, then you see how it relates to being the beginning, middle, and the end of everything, of the universe at least. And this is an example here of an essence or essential aspect of something. Right? You have this whole creation, But the essential part, the thing that was making it work, is the Lord, at least in these Purusha avatar forms. Whether it's the whole material creation, the individual universes, or the individual beings within them. And then in 10:21, he says, of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of lights, I am the radiant sun. Of the Maruts, I am Marichi. And among the stars, I am the moon. And so this is an example of the best in a series of groups, right? So of lights, right, the greatest one is the sun. So Prabhupada says, among all the luminaries shining in the sky, the sun is the chief. So of lights, right, the sun is the greatest. He says, among the stars, the moon is the most prominent at night, and thus the moon represents Krishna. So at nighttime you have the moon and the stars shining in the sky. So the thing shining in the night sky, the moon, takes the cake, is by far the most prominent. So that represents Krishna, because he's the best in that way. So when you start talking about these two things, the essence of something or the greatest of something, especially when they're significant things that they're the essence of or the best of, then it points towards, gives you some idea of Krishna's nature. He's the greatest of the greatest. Among the 12 Adityas, I am Vishnu, one of the names of the sun. This comes from Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Because here they're saying that the Adityas, there's kind of 12 different, it says when the sun enters into the 12 different symbols of the zodiac, there's a slightly different form of the sun god that's there. And Vishnu is the chief amongst that. That's what's being referred to here. Prabhupada mentions the 12 also in his purport. So the best of that group. And then Krishna says in 10:22, of the Vedas, I am the Sama Veda. Of the demigods, I am Indra, the king of heaven. Of the senses, I am the mind. And in living beings, I am the living force. So the Indra is the king of the demigods, so that's pretty plain. He's the best of that group. The senses, the mind also is considered to be the chief of the senses. It controls the other ones, manages the other senses. And then here in the purport, Prabhupada will mention about consciousness, living force, Chaitana. He says the difference between matter and spirit is that matter has no consciousness like the living entity. Therefore, this consciousness is supreme and eternal. Consciousness cannot be produced by a combination of matter. So it's the best. You could say either one. It's the best part of the living beings, or better yet, it's the essence, the most essential and important quality there. All the living beings have this consciousness, and that's what makes. Without the soul, without consciousness, then living beings don't have any real value. So I guess I would lean more towards an essence in that case, an essential quality that gives them value. Although I guess you could say that it's the best part of them. And then Baladev Vidyabhushan explains about the Samaveda. He says the Samaveda is outstanding because of its sweet songs, and Prabhupada will confirm that later on when one song of the Samaveda is considered to be the best. Prabhupada confirms that the Samaveda is special. Why he's that Veda? Because it has sweet, beautiful songs in that one. Then understanding a little bit about Krishna, you can see why that would be a good way to remember him. As Krishna is very sweet and beautiful, and musical too. And 10:23, of all the Rudras, I am Lord Shiva. Of the Yakshas and Rakshasas, I am the Lord of Wealth, Kuvera. Of the Vasus, I am fire, Agni. And of mountains, I am Meru. And I just took the whole purport here. This is a very short one. There are 11 Rudras, of whom Shankara, Lord Shiva, is predominant. So again, the best of a group. He is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord in charge of the mode of ignorance in the universe. That's Lord Shiva. The leader of the Yakshas and Rakshasas is Kuvera, the master treasurer of the demigods, and he is a representation of the Supreme Lord because he's the chief of those. Krishna, of course, also has all wealth. That's the name of Bhagavan, so that makes sense. Kuvera is a treasurer. And Meru is a mountain famed for its rich natural resources. We'll see later on it's also the tallest of the mountains. And that's what Baladeva Vijayabhushan says, why it's significant. In 1024, of priests, O Arjuna, know me to be the chief, Brahaspati. He's the priest of the Devatas, the demigods. Of generals, I am Kartikeya, one of the sons of Lord Shiva. He was one of the generals of the Devatas. He commands their armies. And of bodies of water, I'm the ocean. So again, the best of a group of things. The priest and the general of the demigods, so much higher than than us earthly creatures, than any earthly priest or earthly general. And bodies of water, obviously the ocean is the biggest. So all those make sense, I think, intuitively here. And then of the great sages, I am Bhrigu. There's the 7 great sages, so he's the most prominent of those. Of vibrations, I am the transcendental Om. Of sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy names, Japa is the word there. And of immovable things, I am the Himalayas. So the Om is the seed verse of all the Vedas. Seed thing that, although this is in the Satya Yuga, the golden age of the world, that's what the people just chant the Om. And all the other different mantras of the Vedas, they're accessing certain powers of that Om. The Ekam Aksharam, one syllable, I guess. Okay, and then as far as the other two, Prabhupada says, of all sacrifices, the chanting of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the purest representation of Krishna. Sometimes animal sacrifices are recommended, but in the sacrifice of Hare Krishna, there is no question of violence. It is the simplest and the purest. Baladeva Vijayabhushan also mentions this fact, that sacrifices oftentimes would involve the killing of animals, and so this is very pure, simply to chant mantras. And then he says, Baladeva says, Mount Meru is the highest mountain. And Prabhupada says, Meru is sometimes movable. This is Prabhupada's comment, whereas the Himalayas are never movable. So there's 2 references to mountains. There's Mount Meru, which Baladev says it's the best of mountains with regard to height, and then the Himalayas are the greatest of all the categories of mountains because they're the most immovable. So they're 2 different, the one mountain and the mountain range. They're representing different types of greatness out of their group. So the Meru is the greatest of the group of mountains in height, and the Himalayas are the greatest in terms of being immovable amongst mountains. And again, the mountains are very impressive and big and majestic, so they give you some hint of the Lord. And 26, of all trees I am the banyan tree, and of the sages among the demigods, Deva Rishinam, I am Narada. Of the Gandharvas I am Chitrarata, and among perfected beings I am the sage Kapila. And this also, again, I think it's pretty much the full purport I'm quoting here because it's small. The banyan tree, the Ashwata, It's one of the highest and most beautiful trees, and people in India often worship it as one of their daily morning rituals. Amongst the demigods, they also worship Narada. The demigods worship Narada, who is considered the greatest devotee in the universe. Thus, he is the representation of Krishna as a devotee. The Gandharva planet is filled with entities who sing beautifully, and among them the best singer is Chitrarathi. And amongst the perfect living entities, Kapila, the son of Devahuti, is a representative of Krishna. He is considered an incarnation of Krishna, and his philosophy is mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Later on, another Kapila became famous, but his philosophy was atheistic. Thus, there is a gulf of difference between them. So of perfected beings, Kapila, who is an incarnation of the Lord, is the best amongst that group. So again, the best of various groups. So the best of trees, the best of the sages that around sages of the demigods, that the demigods listen to, the best of the Gandharvas, the best of the perfect living beings. Right. With all these things, again, these we can think of Krishna by thinking of them. Get some idea of who Krishna is. We can remember Krishna by thinking of them. Of horses, know me to be Ucheshrava, produced during the churning of the ocean for nectar. Of lordly elephants, I am Aravata, and among men, I am the monarch, the king, the Nara Adipam. So Prabhupada says in the purport that the devotee demigods and the demons, asuras, once took part in churning the sea. From this churning, nectar and poison were produced, and Lord Shiva drank the poison. From the nectar were produced many entities, of which there was a horse named Uchaishrava. Another animal produced from the nectar was an elephant named Airavata. Because these two animals were produced from nectar, they have special significance, and they are representatives of Krishna. So they're the best of the horses and the best of the elephants. Airavata is the carrier of Indra. Also, can't remember offhand Uchaishrava where he is. Then in 1028, of weapons, I am the thunderbolt. That's also the weapon of Lord Indra. So very significant type of weapon. Among cows, I'm the surabhi. Of causes for procreation, I am Kandarpa, the god of love. And of serpents, I am Vasuki. So again, the best amongst things, generally. Let's see. Prabhupada says in his purport, in Krishna Loka, in the spiritual sky, there are cows which can be milked at any time, and they give as much milk as one likes. Of course, such cows do not exist in this material world, but there is mention of them in Krishna Loka. The Lord keeps many such cows, which are called surabhi. In this, it is stated that the Lord is engaged in herding the surabhi cows. Kandarpa is the sex desire for presenting good sons. Therefore, Kandarpa is the representative of Krishna. So sometimes sex is engaged in only for sense gratification. Such sex does not represent Krishna, but sex for the generation of good children is called Kandarpa and represents Krishna. So of those of sensual desire, right? The one that wants to, the best of things, that one that wants to produce good children, the one done for procreation is the best. Of all the cows, those that produce this unlimited amount of milk, and the Vasuki is the king of the serpents. So again, the best of these various groups. Yeah, the thunderbolt, the best weapon. Okay, so now we'll go to 1029. Of the many hooded Nagas, I am Ananta, and among the aquatics, I am the demigod Varuna. Of departed ancestors, I am Aryama, and among the dispensers of law, I am Yama, the Lord of Death. So demigod Varuna is the Lord of all of the waters, of all the bodies of water. So he's lives in the ocean. So he's the best of the aquatics. Nagas are serpents with many heads, and Ananta is the one that carries all the planets on his hoods. The greatest of all those. Arjuna is the best of the ancestors, and Yamaraj is the one who he passes judgment on all of the departed souls. So he's the best of the dispensers of law. The last word in people who leave their bodies, their souls are judged by Yamaraj, and he sets them up with their next life. So again, the best in the group. Among the Daitya demons, this is text 30, I am the devoted Prahlad. Among subduers, I am time. Among beasts, I am the lion. And among birds, I am Garuda. So again, the Prahlad was, of course, the great exalted devotee of the Lord, who was born in the family of demons. So that's why he's the best of those. Subduers, right? Nobody can stop time. Nobody can defeat time. No one, at least in the universe, can. In the spiritual world, people are beyond that. But time destroys everything. Our time is running out. The universe only lasts a certain amount of time. So it's irresistible by any means known, and probably to be known. There's no way to resist it. The lion, we often say the king of the beasts, we even say in English. And Garuda is the carrier of Lord Vishnu. So that's the best of the birds. Prabhupada says there are many subduing principles, but time wears down all things in the material universe and so represents Krishna. 1031. Of purifiers, I am the wind. Of the wielders of weapons, I am Rama. Of fishes, I am the shark. This is a makara. And of flowing rivers, I am the Ganges. Prabhupada usually translates that makara as shark. It's not exactly shark, I don't think, but I'm not sure exactly what it refers to. But Prabhupada usually calls it like that. And so, of course, the shark is very powerful. This makara is the leader of all the aquatic entities, except for Varuna, all of the fish type creatures. And then the rivers, he's the Ganges, obviously the holiest river, coming from the toe of Lord Vishnu. The toe purified of Vamanadev, pierced the universe. Among types of argumentation, and this is the last one that says of. I'm sorry, I put this in the wrong. I have to change this. I think I put a purport here in the wrong place. Yeah, I put this one before. I'll have to go back. Okay, so 1032. Of all creations, I am the beginning and the end, and also the middle, O Arjuna. Of all sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self, and among logicians, I am the conclusive truth. I have to fix this. So, about that conclusive truth, Prabhupada, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Prabhupada gives also kind of he summarizes this a little bit, but I think Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it pretty clearly. Among types, also Baladev Vijayabhushan, they're all three of them kind of talk in similar ways. There's different kinds of argumentation or logic. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, among types of argumentation, in order to establish one's own idea and defeat others' ideas, such as the Jalpa and Vitanda, I am Vada, which attempts to discern actual truth with the goal of coming to a conclusion. So they all explain that there's kind of ways of arguing that's just meant to win arguments. I think we call it sophistry. That's what, people are just expert at argument. And so the idea is for you to establish your own position and defeat other people's position, but what really is true isn't so important. So the type of logic or argumentation that comes to a real, accurate conclusion, actual truth, that represents Krishna. The sophistry and these other types of things are not so, or just debate techniques are not very important. Beginning and end and middle, we can understand that. This, of all sciences, I am the spiritual science of the self. That should be pretty familiar for us, especially from the first chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna opened with that knowledge that we're all spirit souls. So many other types of things that don't at least come to that level don't have so much value. Prabhupada was always saying that the modern educational system has no department of the soul, and therefore, misses out on real value. We only have very, very superficial knowledge. So real spiritual knowledge begins with that. The adhyatma vidya, it means the spiritual knowledge of the self. Prabhupada translates it. He says it's spiritual knowledge in the word for word, but he says spiritual knowledge of the self. Adhyatma, that's what it means. So. And 33, of the letters I am letter A, and among compound words I am the dual compound. I am also inexhaustible time, and of creators I am Brahma. So Brahma is the one who creates the secondary creation of the universe. The universe comes, it's in a very kind of raw form, and the Lord Brahma then does all the detail creation afterwards. Let's see, I think we have some explanation here. Akara, the first letter of the alphabet, this is from the Prabhupada's purport, is the beginning of the Vedic literature. Without akara, nothing can be sounded. Therefore, it is the beginning of sound. In Sanskrit, there are many compound words, of which the dual word like Rama-Krishna is called a dvandva. In this compound, the words Rama and Krishna have the same form, and therefore the compound is called dual. So this is kind of you have to be a Sanskrit guy to appreciate this so much, but apparently in other kinds of compound words, they'll have different forms, different parts of speech or different conjugations. But here it says they're both the same form, the dvandva, so that considered to be the best of those. And then among all kinds of killers, time is the ultimate. This is from the purport as well, because time kills everything. Time is the representative of Krishna because in due course of time there will be a great fire and everything will be annihilated. And so I think explaining that last part about the fire, Baldev Vidyabhushan says that the fire which comes from the mouth of Anantashesha is being referred to in this verse when it's talked about time. And so Prabhupada seems to be referring to that also in his commentary. It seems why Prabhupada mentions the fire here instead of just time. So, a time comes when the fire comes from the mouth of Shesha and devours everything in the world. 34, I am all-devouring death, and I am the generating principle of all that is yet to be. Among women I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. This is a little bit interesting here. Prabhupada says, as for future development, I guess death you can understand. It's every entity goes through that. It's the end of everything. People. As for future development, all living entities undergo 6 basic changes. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they reproduce, they dwindle, and finally they vanish. Of these changes, the first is deliverance from the womb, and that is Krishna. The first generation is the beginning of all future activities. This is an essence of something, most important. But in order to have a future, Right? You have to have the beginning, the birth. So for any living creature, there's no future without the birth. So it's the beginning of everything. And of course, death is also inescapable, right? The end of everything. Something we can't avoid. So nothing can happen unless there's birth for entities, and death is there for everyone and unavoidable. And then regarding the seventh prophet says, the seven opulences listed: fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience are considered feminine. If a person possesses all of them or some of them, he becomes glorious. Okay, so these are not just qualities of women. In fact, what Baladev Vijibhushan says, he says that these seven are feminine deities or demigoddesses that personify these qualities. And so Prabhupada says, if anybody has all of them or some of them, male or female, that person becomes glorious. So they're not just qualities of women, but they're feminine in the fact that they're embodied by feminine demigoddesses. So that's why they're feminine. But they're not only qualities of women. So they're exalted qualities, whether they're possessed by men or women, but they're represented by female demigoddesses. And so Prabhupada says, if a person possesses all of them or some of them, he becomes glorious. So they're wonderful qualities. Okay. Then 1035, of the hymns in the Samaveda, I am the Brihat Sama. And of poetry, I am the Gayatri. Of months, I am Margashirsha, November, December. And of seasons, I am flower-bearing spring. And so Prabhupada explains, he says, the Samaveda is rich with beautiful songs. That's why it was described before that it represented Krishna. Baladev Vijibhushan said that was what distinguished it from the other ones. Prabhupada says that the Samaveda is rich with beautiful songs played by the various demigods. One of these songs is the Brihat Sama, which has an exquisite melody and is sung at midnight. And then he says, so because the Gayatri mantra is especially meant for God realization, it represents the Supreme Lord. This mantra is meant for spiritually advanced people, and when one attains success in chanting it, he can enter into the transcendental position of the Lord. And then he explains, the month of November, December is considered the best of all months, because in India grains are collected from the fields at this time, and the people become very happy. Of course, spring is a season universally liked because it is neither too hot nor too cold, and the flowers and trees blossom and flourish. In the spring, there are also many ceremonies commemorating Krishna's pastimes. Therefore, this is considered to be the most joyful of all seasons, and it is the representative of the Supreme Lord, Krishna. 1036. I am also the gambling of cheats, and of the splendid I am the splendor, I am victory, I am adventure, and I am the strength of the strong. And what we'll see here, these are, gambling is a, Prabhupada says, of all cheating processes, gambling stands supreme and therefore represents Krishna. So it's the best of the, of a group of things. Prabhupada also goes on to mention that Krishna can also cheat, and when he cheats, he's the best of all. So that's why it's maybe why this is mentioned. Krishna is tricky, so it maybe hints at that part of his nature. And then he says, among the victorious, he is victory. He is the splendor of the splendid. Among the enterprising and industrious, he is the most enterprising, the most industrious. Among adventurers, he is the most adventurous, and among the strong, he is the strongest. I think some of the other commentators are saying more that he's just like he can continue in the same vein. Among the victorious, he's victory, the splendor of the splendid, the enterprisingness of the enterprising, the adventurousness of the adventurers, and the strength of the strong. Yeah, in the translation, probably he's the strength of the strong. So it seems to tend more like that. He's the essential quality of these things. victory, splendor, enterprisingness and industriousness, adventurousness and strength. Anything that's defined, by that particular term, something that's splendid. All right, that means it has a whole lot of that. It stands out because of that one particular quality. So anything that really stands out with something, that quality is Krishna. Someone or something that has some quality to a large degree, Krishna is that quality. Whoever it may be that has that. And then 37, of the descendants of Vrishni, I am Vasudeva, and of the Pandavas, I am Arjuna. So he says that he's telling that to Arjuna. Of the sages, I am Vyasa, and among great thinkers, I am Ushana. And Prabhupada says, among the Kavis, Ushana or Shukracharya was the spiritual master of the demons, and he was extremely intelligent and a far-seeing politician. And then he says, it is to be understood that the Vasudeva referred to in this, because there's other commentators say that there's an issue because Vasudeva can refer to Krishna. It's a name for Krishna. So how can Krishna be his own vibhuti? would seem redundant there. How he can represent himself, he is himself. So Prabhupada says, it is to be understood that the Vasudeva referred to in this verse of Bhagavad Gita is Baladev or Balaram, because he is the original source of all incarnations, and thus he is the sole source of Vasudeva. So that's that's the expansions of the Vishnu forms. There's Vasudeva, there's a Vasudeva and Sankarshan and Pradyumna and Anuruddha, the quadruple expansions of Vishnu. So here it says it's referring to Balaram. And the other commentators agree with that analysis. Then 38, we're coming to the end here of the opulences. Among all means of suppressing lawlessness, I am punishment, and of those who seek victory, I am morality. Of secret things, I am silence, and of the wise, I am the wisdom. So the best of secret things, the essence of the essential quality in wise people, I guess the best quality in those who seek victory. And he says, among all, it's of all means of suppression, punishment. And Prabhupada says here, suppressing lawlessness. And kind of seems to make sense from what Baladev Vijayabhushan says. Baladev Vijayabhushan says that the punishment mentioned is of the sort which brings people onto the right path, that corrects the lawlessness. So a particular type of punishment. Vishnacharya Thakur makes it more just, he says, the punishment of the punishers, making it more of like an essential quality. But Prabhupada and Baladev Vijayabhushan seem to think of it a little bit differently. Sometimes the acharyas see things from different perspectives. And then 39, now Krishna is summing up everything and bringing it back to kind of where we started. He started the summary of pure bhakti in 10.8, 10.9, 10.10, 10.11 with this notion that he's the source of everything, and everything comes from him and is controlled by him. So he says, furthermore, O Arjuna, I am the generating seed of all existences. So that's the essence of everything also. But he's kind of, now he's pulling things back to a grander scale. There is no being, moving or non-moving, that it can exist without me. All right, so he's the essential part of he's the essential part of existence. He's existence itself, actually. So he's starting to take it back from the specific opulences, and again trying to reveal how powerful he really is. Almighty in 1040 is Almighty conqueror of enemies. There is no end to my divine manifestations. What I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences. Know that, in 41, know that all opulent, beautiful, and glorious creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. And in 42 he explains what that means even more. He says, but what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. Okay? And Prabhupada says in his purport for this one that the Supreme Lord is represented throughout the entire material universes by his entering into all things as the Supersoul. The Lord here tells Arjuna that there is no point in understanding how things exist in their separate opulence and grandeur. He should know that all things are existing due to Krishna's entering them as Supersoul. From Brahma, the most gigantic entity, on down to the smallest ant, all are existing because the Lord has entered each and all and is sustaining them. So this kind of, stimulates the question again. So what's the need for studying these the vibhutis? What's the benefit from them, especially for practitioners of bhakti? Because Krishna kind of begins and ends with that same notion that I'm just the source of everything. Just understand that. Why do we have to talk? What's the need for all these different so detailed knowledge? Just know, whatever it is, it comes from me, controlled by me. He's the seed of all existences. I mean, that's how powerful Krishna is. We talked about this, especially in Isha Upanishad, and also as we've been talking about pure bhakti in 7 and 9 in particular chapters, and the beginning, and also the beginning of chapter 10. So here, the vibhutis, they only give a faint idea of Krishna's actual power. Because Krishna, he's not only the source of everything, but he's the source of existence. And this is what's even more far out. It's not that like there's a world, and then within it Krishna can do everything. Like there's Krishna and there's a world, and Krishna can do whatever he wants with it. He's the origin of all existence. Existence depends upon him. He's not part of an existence. Which means that things can be any way that he wants without any limitation. There's nothing that limits him in any way. There's no ground rules. There's no boundaries for him. Whatever exists, and anything could exist, is simply up to him. And he can change it if he wants. We really can't. Prabhupada says many times that everybody knows that God is great, but we should know how great he is. Well, we really can never wrap our minds around that fully. There's the past time where Brahma kidnaps Lord Krishna's cowherd boys, his friends, his buddies, the other cowherd boys, and the calves, and Krishna expands himself into various Vishnu forms in the form of replacements, and Brahma is bewildered, and finally he reveals to Brahma that all of these little replacement boys and calves that were seemingly identical to the ones that Brahma had kidnapped, were all Vishnu forms, the forms of the Supreme Lord. And Brahma, basically, just seeing that, he was passing out. He's far more intelligent than we are. He can control the whole universe in so many ways. And so he was it was just too much for him. He was blacking out from trying to process that. So we can't even begin to process how great Krishna is. We can make some kind of statement like that all of reality is it's him. It depends upon him. He can do anything he wants without no ground rules, no limitations, no boundaries. Reality is his. He's not part of reality. So the vibhutis only give us a hint of Krishna's actual power. And the understanding of Krishna's actual power, because this has been mentioned so much in these last chapters, really provides a great foundation, I think a necessary foundation for faith in pure bhakti. That since there's no second thing besides Krishna, everything is him and under his control, then the notion of exclusively worshiping him, making that the goal of our lives, becomes reasonable. What else are you going to take shelter of? What else are you going to worship? What else are you going to rely upon? Because there's nothing else but Krishna. So that kept being revealed to us, because it's something foundational for our faith, that we don't have to practice any other process. We don't have to do anything else. We don't have to deal with anybody else besides Krishna. And that if we worship him and perform bhakti, that everything will be taken care of. And he explained that also in more detail in chapter 9. So that part, the truth about his existence, the truth about him, the truth about his power, is really important for us in building our faith. We can have full confidence that if we worship Krishna and become his devotees, that there's nothing else left for us to do because of his. But the other thing is that that Krishna, in his personal form, he actually covers over his power. We're going to see how Krishna reveals some more of his power in the next chapter, how it blows Arjuna's mind. So that for the purposes of relationship, Krishna only reveals some of his really important, best qualities. So as soon as he started to reveal a little bit something of his opulence, even Arjuna's going to freak out. We're going to see next chapter, Brahma, he was passing out. So if we try to encounter Krishna as he is, the source even of existence, well, how can you have relationship with that? It would even a tiny fraction of a percentage of his power would just blow our minds. We're part of his power. So how can we even interact with him in any way? So Krishna, in his personal form, he displays. He has all qualities, but he displays some of the best of his qualities, and allows us to be at least not pass out like Brahma and not be freaked out as much as Arjuna is going to be. So I think looking at the vibhutis, why shouldn't we just focus on Krishna's power, as Krishna seems to suggest at the end, and he does in text 8 of this chapter? Why again should we deal with these vibhutis? Because not only do they help us to remember Krishna, but they help us to think Krishna in his more personal way, not as just the source, controller, and the seed of all existences, which is not very relatable, but in a more relatable form. So by, in some ways, only conveying a portion of his power, if we already have the understanding of his full power, enough to have our faith, then this actually can nurture our relationship by pointing out certain qualities of his, hinting at certain qualities of his in a more limited way. Because when we deal with him, we're dealing with their amazing qualities. Saves the best, his essential ones he manifests as in his personal form. But we can't. We simply don't have what it takes to be able to have any experience of anything approaching his full power. So I think in that way also the vibhutis are interesting. Even the interesting was the gambling. Prabhupada says that Krishna can be quite tricky. It even hints a little bit at his personality, and he has these other qualities. He's victorious. He can he's the wielder of weapons. He can sometimes he's fighting. He's power and strength and all these other kind of qualities that are mentioned, victorious, you know. But in his pastimes, when he's fighting, he's concealing his power. Sometimes he fights with the great demons. And in the case with Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyakashipu asked Prahlad, I've been trying to kill you. Where do you get your power from? Hiranyakashipu was seemingly the most powerful person in the universe. And he couldn't kill his little son, little child's son. So where do you get your power from? Why can't I kill you, basically? And Prahlad says, I get my power from the same place you get yours. There's only one source of power. So sometimes we see Krishna's fighting demons or lifting Govardhan Hill. No, it's amazing. He does it. It's amazing for anybody else, but for him, he didn't have to lift Govardhan Hill to protect the residents of Vrindavan from the storms that Indra brought. He can just turn the storms off. Everything the demigods control is under the control of Krishna. He can just stop it. He can turn Indra off, have him go to sleep, have him disappear. Do the same thing for Hiranyakashipu. He could make him have no strength at all. He could make him stop. He could make him, just turn him off. Forget about him. Send him some other universe. He doesn't actually have to act directly. But he shows heroism. He shows, chivalry. He shows so many different qualities. Protecting his devotee. So they're wonderful qualities that he demonstrates. So there's that difference. Our Brajabihari Prabhu here, often he says there's a difference between, he says, tattva, the understanding Krishna's real nature, and rasa, or relationship. So we need the tattva, the understanding of Krishna's nature, to build our faith, but we understand Krishna's essential qualities in his personal form to build relationship. And that pushes the understanding of tattva, or his actual power, a little bit into the background. So next week we start chapter 11. We're going to see where Arjuna gets freaked out by having a direct vision of some of Krishna's opulences, and we'll see a little bit of that interplay between that relationship and opulence and power. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.